Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. The WBA has not waited for an explanation from Dillian Whyte, dumping the heavyweight contender entirely from its rankings in its latest update. So I'll get to the rankings more broadly, the ups and downs, because there is some big ups and some big downs, as well as the inclusion of David Price, who recently had a good win for him. But we'll start with the Dillian Whyte situation first. The WBA has not waited to hear what's happened with the situation involving Dillian Whyte. He fought Oscar Rivas on July 20, but subsequent to that, it emerged through a leak to the media that there was allegedly a failed doping test. And the substance has been named Dianabol, the metabolites of which were found in his system, or this is the allegation. The WBC has subsequently confirmed there was an adverse finding, and it has suspended Whyte as its WBC mandatory challenger and WBC interim heavyweight champion. Those were the two things that were on the line for his fight with Oscar Rivas. So now we have the WBA hot on the heels of the WBC handing down those suspensions, dumping Whyte entirely from its top 15. So he had been number 3, and if this hadn't emerged and come out, Whyte probably would have stayed where he was in the rankings, but he is gone altogether. And actually, some might say this is a bit unfair by the WBA, but actually this is somewhat consistent with some of the treatment they've meted out to other heavyweights. You might recall, Luis Ortiz in 2017, he failed a test and was claimed that there was some paperwork that hadn't been filled in, that he had some blood pressure medication, and this is what he was claiming was the reason that he failed the test, and it was just a procedural issue that he hadn't done the paperwork. And some of that seemed a little bit dicey, but the WBA immediately after that dropped Ortiz from its rankings. He was the number 1 contender at the time, although he was going to be facing Deontay Wilder for the WBC. He actually wanted to face Joshua after the WBC pulled the sanction of that fight with Wilder, but the WBA said, no, you're out of our rankings altogether, gave him 12 months in the end. So there is some precedent here, and because you might recall also with that situation, the WBC ended up buying Luis Ortiz's reasons or excuses, however you want to look at it, and ultimately he was reinstalled to their rankings, and he fought Deontay Wilder about 6 months after that. But the WBA didn't accept anything, and they said, look, there was something in a test, it was failed, and he was out of the rankings, banned for 12 months from WBA sanctioned fights. So you could maybe look at this as the same, because like Ortiz, Dillian Whyte, if this is a second offence and there is an adverse finding in the test, as we're hearing, so effectively the WBA, like Ortiz, just dropped him out altogether from the rankings, and maybe they will end up handing something down to Dillian Whyte regardless of whatever other processes are happening at the moment. The WBC is going to be holding its own investigation. We know that UKAD and the British Boxing Board of Control, there's still some stuff happening there. B sample and probably an investigation to come with evidence and other bits and pieces likely to drag on for some considerable time. So remains to be seen what will happen here with the WBA, but for the time being, I think we can safely say Dillian Whyte will not be re-entering the rankings until there is something conclusive that is produced on his part to prove his innocence. And this is an example by the WBA where there's just strict liability. If there was something in a test that shouldn't have been there, there's no excuses. It's over to you to prove that it was a mistake, or to exonerate yourself. So that's the position that Whyte finds himself in, and largely with fans as well. I mean, a lot of people are now looking at Dillian Whyte going, this is pretty bad, it looks pretty suspect. We don't know all the facts of the matter, but remains to be seen how he can actually clear his name here. But obviously he's got the chance to do so we'll see what happens. But getting to the rest of the top 15. So remaining at number 1 is Trevor Bryan. He was meant to be facing Manuel Charr. They were going to unify, as it were, Charr's regular title and Trevor Bryan's interim heavyweight world title, and that was meant to have been announced by now, and they potentially could have even fought by now, but for whatever reason, it hasn't happened. And some speculate, because obviously Trevor Bryan's name has been bandied about for Tyson Fury's next fight. Maybe that is the hold-up. We just don't know yet, but Tyson Fury has name dropped him, mentioned his name, as has his promoter, Frank Warren's. And we're hearing that ESPN wants a US heavyweight fighter. And Trevor Bryan is one of a small number of guys that could actually fit the bill. And he has a little bit of hardware in the interim heavyweight title, so it remains to be seen what's going to happen. And Trevor Bryan, with this post here on Instagram saying that when they sleep on you, but you know your future's about to be lit, I mean, maybe that's a cryptic message that something is going to be announced soon. Who knows? Alexander Usyk, he remains at number 2 spot in the rankings. Number 3, this is where Dillian Whyte had been, so Anthony Joshua moves up 1 spot. At number 4, Otto Wallen, he also moves up 1 spot. He had been at 5. Sergey Kuzmin, likewise, he moves up 1 spot to 5th. And Filip Hrgović, who has a fight coming up in Mexico, August the 24th, he is going to be facing Mario Heredia. He is up 2 spots to number 6, despite not fighting in the last couple of months. At number 7, we have Adam Kownacki. He is the big mover in this month's rankings. He's up 5 places from number 12. The last time he fought, it was January, so I'm not sure what sort of accounts for the big movement here, because obviously he hasn't had a fight in 7 months. But Adam Kownacki, a big winner in this month's rankings, up 5 places. Michael Hunter, he's up 1 spot to number 8. At number 9, a big winner in this month's rankings is David Price, who enters the rankings. He's been out of them for some considerable time, but Price gets there courtesy of his win over Dave Allen, forcing Allen to retire in the 10th round of their fight on the Dillian Whyte and Oscar Rivas undercard. So David Price, he can start to mix it at a better level. He's got a ranking now, and that might be attractive to get some other fighters in the ring with him. We'll see what happens there, but a big winner. Alexander Povetkin holds at number 10. Kyotaro Fujimoto, he holds firm at number 11. Alexander Teslenko, he is up 1 spot, the prospect. Ivan Daichko as well, up 1 spot. And a new entrant into the top 15 at number 14 is Mladen Miljas. And he actually hasn't fought since March, and his last 3 fights have been against pretty much out-and-out journeymen. So the inclusion of Miljas in the rankings is a little bit curious for me. He's got a fight later in August, but yeah, I was a little surprised to see his name there. But there's a number of prospects starting to enter the rankings. Some of the guys from the class of 2016, the Olympics, and of that sort of era in terms of amateurs who've turned pro in the last few years. You can see like Ivan Daichko, Filip Hrgović. You also have Sergey Kuzmin there, and now Mladen Miljas, who turned pro a few years ago, also enters the rankings, which I believe for the WBA is his first time. And at number 15, eternally in the rankings, is Frizikendo. And there was a story that popped up a couple of weeks ago that suggested that Frizikendo is not done. He's not retiring. He still wants a title shot that he is owed. So we'll have to see where that goes. But certainly him being at number 15 instead of being at number 3 where he was for an eternity makes more sense to just corral him at the back of the rankings. But yeah, Dillian Whyte is a casualty in this month's rankings, out altogether. The WBA just ruthlessly drops him altogether. Mladen Miljas in for the first time, I believe. David Price re-enters the rankings after a hiatus, and Adam Kownacki up 5 spots. And I must note as well, Oscar Rivas, who had been at number 7 in the rankings, he's gone altogether. So after his loss to Dillian Whyte, gone altogether. So yeah, interesting reading this month for the WBA Top 15. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.